Chapter 3, Part 1. The Wounded Land. The forest had swallowed the road. Once, it might have been a two-lane highway connecting towns, but now it was nothing more than a suggestion, a line of crumbling pavement fractured by tree roots and buried under thick layers of moss, soil, and wet leaves. Tomasz led them through it, machete swinging low to cut through thorny underbrush that clawed at their legs like the land itself wanted them to turn back. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days. Not a downpour, just that endless gray spit, constant and clinging. Clothes never dried. Skin stayed pruned and clammy. Every footstep squelched in the muck, and everything stank of rot and mold. Maja had started calling it the soup. Her boots sloshed with each step. "I miss concrete," she muttered. "I miss sidewalks. Bricks. Shit that doesn't move under your feet." Tomasz didn't reply. His eyes scanned the tree line, searching for motion. He hadn't slept well. Too many broken noises in the dark, branches snapping, the distant grunt of animals, the silence afterward. The forest was alive, but it didn't make the normal sounds he remembered. It was too quiet, or maybe they were just too loud. Behind them, his father trudged, muttering curses in Danish under his breath. The girl, Anya, close beside him. She barely spoke these days, walking with her shoulders hunched and her eyes fixed on the ground. They were halfway through the woods that stretched north through what used to be central Poland. According to Tomasz's memory and a faded military map, a small river should lie ahead. He hoped to follow it west for a bit before crossing northward again. They stopped to rest beneath a collapsed concrete overpass. Moss grew in thick curtains across its crumbling face. Someone, years ago, had spray-painted a faded red arrow and the words "safe" in block letters on the old bridge. Below that, another word had been scrawled more recently. "Lies." Maja read it and chuckled bitterly. "That's fair." Tomasz dropped his pack and sat heavily on a piece of rusted rebar. His knees ached, his back pulsed with pain from the fall 2 days ago when he'd slipped into a ditch. "How are we still in Poland?" she asked, not expecting an answer. The forest felt like it was growing thicker every hour. Old civilizations surfaced occasionally. An abandoned car, a rusted stop sign, the shattered skeleton of a farmhouse with a tree growing through the kitchen. But mostly, nature had taken it all back with ferocity. There was something aggressive in it. This wasn't the slow crawl of moss and ivy. It felt personal. "Boars are close," his father said, stepping out of the underbrush and shaking mud from his boots. "I saw signs." Tomasz nodded. "How many?" "At least 4. Big ones." Anya shivered but said nothing. Maja looked at Tomasz. "You ever fought a wild pig?" He gave her a sideways look. "You don't fight them, you try not to be there." They ate quickly, dried meat and a thick paste of mashed roots and lentils. It was bland, but warm. Tomasz had rigged a heating pouch salvaged from an old ration crate, a trick that still surprised Maja every time it worked. "You're a wizard," she said, poking the warm pack like it might explode. "Just a soldier who hated cold food." When they moved on, the forest changed subtly. The trees stood taller, straighter. Pines gave way to more birch, and the light shifted. Moss glowed on the trunks in the overcast haze. It would have been beautiful, if not for the feeling, like the forest had eyes. And teeth. Then the mud turned slicker. Deeper. The air changed, smelling of iron and water. They found the river, or what was left of it. It had swollen with the rain, rising above its banks, turning the forest into a bog. Black water lapped at drowned grass, and twisted tree trunks stood like the ribs of some giant corpse. They couldn't cross here, not without swimming, and they'd never make it with gear. Maja stared at the water. "We follow it west?" "We don't have a choice," Tomasz said, adjusting his rifle strap. They walked until evening. Everything ached. Maja slipped once, catching her fall on a root that sliced open her palm. It wasn't deep, but blood mixed with the mud and water. Tomasz took her hand, gently cleaned it, and wrapped it in gauze from his dwindling kit. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Just my pride," she said. "You'll need both hands for what's ahead." "Thanks, Dad," she smirked. He smiled faintly. "Don't call me that. I'm not that old." But he was. Or at least, he felt it. When they made camp that night under a collapsed awning, Tomasz didn't sleep right away. He stared out into the trees, rifle on his lap. The forest whispered. Not like a voice, but a presence. The land wasn't dead, it was wounded. And like any wounded thing, it was angry. Chapter 3, Part 2, Ghostlines. The sound came at dawn. A low, distant hum. Steady, unnatural, mechanical. It didn't belong here. Tomasz woke first, rifle already in hand, crouched in the wet gravel beneath the old awning. His ears strained in the gray morning light. The others were stirring, slow and stiff with cold. Maja blinked the sleep from her eyes, sat up, and froze when she heard it too. That's not thunder, she whispered. No, Tomasz said, eyes narrowing. It's movement. Machinery. His father pressed 2 fingers to the ground, then his ear. A trick from an older war. Steel. Big. Not close, but not far either. They broke camp quickly, stuffing their gear into packs still damp from the night before. The air smelled of metal and ozone. The sound pulsed like a heartbeat. Low, constant, impossible to place by ear. They headed west, toward it. It took 2 hours of hiking through thick brush and slick overgrown paths before they saw the first sign. Tracks, not vehicle tracks, but railway lines. Old ones, double-wide, mostly buried in moss but unmistakably maintained. No rust, no leaves, no vines. Someone had kept them clear. Impossible, Maja said, crouching beside one of the rails. These should be dust by now. Tomasz said nothing, just ran his fingers along the steel. Cold, clean. The bolts were polished. A faint heat lingered beneath the surface. Residual energy from friction? Power lines underground? Someone's using this, he said at last. They followed the track north, parallel to the hum, now louder, more persistent. Soon they reached a signal tower, or what used to be one. It had been partially collapsed by time and nature, but a new metal mast had been built inside its broken skeleton, reinforced, powered. A drone antenna buzzed faintly at the top. Tomasz scanned the base of the tower and spotted the device, a solar-fed generator about the size of a suitcase, hidden behind a steel grate and faintly humming. A small surveillance dish pointed down the track, blinking blue. Is it watching us? Anya asked. No, Tomasz said, but it's watching something. We should disable it, his father muttered. No good comes from being seen. But Tomasz hesitated. Look at the cables. That system's not just powering surveillance. It's running something bigger. Could be feeding the whole line? He knelt by the device and opened the outer panel. Inside was a beautifully compact piece of tech, next-gen power balancing modules, sealed against the elements. A field engineer's dream. Something meant for remote, long-term operations. He could disable it. Strip it for parts, even. Maja hovered beside him, intrigued. Could we take it? We could, but we'd need a cart to haul it, and whatever this powers might stop working. That might bring people looking. Anya broke her silence. If someone is looking, maybe they're close. Tomasz stood, closed the panel gently. We leave it. Seriously? Maja asked. It's a beacon, he said. A silent alarm. Pull the wrong wire, and we might have boots on us in an hour. Or drones. They kept moving, staying parallel to the tracks. Over the next hour, they passed 2 more signal nodes, each one newer than the last. One had a mounted camera with a clean lens and fresh wiring. Another had heat sensors positioned toward the tree line. Whoever built this wasn't scavenging. They were manufacturing. Organizing. But no one was visible. No guards. No footprints. Just the endless hum of a system that ran without pause, like a ghost train waiting to arrive. They found the station just before sundown. It was a small cargo hub, 2 loading docks, a signal house, and a siding platform. The tracks ran straight through it, curving north into a dense patch of birch. And there, under the cover of vines and long-dead weeds, sat a freight car. Cleaned and unrusted. Used. Tomasz's father spat. Someone's moving cargo. Maja stepped closer. Or people. The freight car was locked with a heavy magnetic clamp, military grade. Heat signatures on the locking panel meant it had been accessed within the last 24 hours. Tomasz circled it cautiously, then stopped. Near the wheelbase, half buried in the mud, lay something small and red. He bent down, picked it up. A child's shoe. Too clean, too recent. No one spoke. That night, they camped far from the tracks, back in the forest, concealed under the roots of a fallen tree. The hum had faded again, replaced by the sounds of owls and distant hogs. Maja stared into the fire. You think it's a supply route? Tomasz didn't answer right away. His hands were wrapped around his rifle. No, not just supplies. Then what? His voice dropped to a whisper. Logistics. They've rebuilt the lines for something big. Food, fuel, or people. His father grunted. Slavery. Anya's head lowered. They all knew it. The silence was heavier than the forest. Maja broke it. Then we stay away from the tracks. Tomasz nodded. For now. He didn't say the rest. Eventually, we may have to follow them. Chapter 3, Part 3. The Pack. They came with the mist. At first, it was only shapes, quick shadows between trees, too large to be dogs, too fast for wild hogs. Tomasz stopped mid-stride. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Not a bird in the canopy. Not even wind in the leaves. His father noticed it too. He cocked his head, squinted through the fog. We're being followed. Maja tightened her grip on the metal hiking staff they'd made from an old curtain rod and a shovel handle. Anya loaded another round into her sidearm, fingers trembling. "Wolves?" she asked. Tomasz gave a slow nod. "Wolves." In the early 2000s, Denmark hadn't seen a wolf in 2 centuries. They were a myth, something in fairy tales and documentaries. But in 2012, the first returned across the German border. Just a few at first, slinking back into a world paved over. Then the world fell apart. By 2026, pandemics had pushed humanity to its knees. Infrastructure collapsed. Roads cracked. Villages emptied. The wolves thrived. They bred fast, spread faster. With no one to stop them, no fences maintained, no hunting pressure, they multiplied into hundreds, then thousands. Now, in 2064, they were the apex predator in Denmark. And they were hungry. The first lunge came out of nowhere. A blur of fur and teeth straight for the mule. Tomasz fired just in time, cracking a round into the charging wolf's shoulder. It yelped, spun, collapsed in the leaves, but it wasn't alone. 4 more emerged from the mist, low and coordinated. Smart. They weren't attacking blindly. "They're testing us," Tomasz shouted. "Circle formation, now." They backed against a half-fallen oak. The mule brayed and kicked, panicked, but held her ground. Anya clutched the reins. Tomasz, his father, and Maja stood in a triangle, guns and steel out. Then came the howl. Not nearby. Not far. Dozens. The fight was fast and cruel. A pair came from the left. Maja swung first, her makeshift spear cracking one across the jaw. It stumbled, regrouped, lunged again. Tomasz shot the second one clean through the chest, but the first clamped down on Maja's calf. She screamed. The wolf shook her leg like it was a toy. Tomasz didn't hesitate. Rifle whipped sideways, slamming into the wolf's ribs. It yelped, backed off. Maja crumpled, bleeding but conscious. He stood over her, firing another round into the forest. "Stay down." 3 wolves charged from the opposite flank. His father dropped one, gut-shot another, and kicked the third square in the jaw. The pack pulled back, regrouping in the trees, watching. Then, as suddenly as it began, they vanished. Gone like ghosts. No howls, no snarls, just fog and blood and trembling silence. "Why did they leave?" Maja hissed through her teeth. Tomasz pressed a bandage to her calf. The bite had torn flesh but missed the artery. It was bad, but survivable. "They weren't trying to kill us," he said. "They were probing. Learning." "They're smarter than I thought," his father added. Tomasz looked toward the tree line. The wolf pack hadn't retreated out of fear. They'd made a choice. Tactical. They were learning from humans. Adapting. Just like humans had once learned from them. That night, Maja sat with her leg elevated, wrapped in gauze made from boiled rags and old shirts. Her eyes were hollow, but she wasn't broken. Tomasz sat beside her, handing her a strip of roasted root and smoked squirrel. "I thought wolves were just animals," she said. "They are," he said softly, "but so are we. We just wear thicker masks." She stared at the fire, then looked at him. "Thanks for pulling me out." He shrugged, awkward. "I wasn't going to let a wolf take you." A pause. Then, dryly, "You bite enough for both of us." She laughed. Blood loss and exhaustion turned it into a cough, but it was genuine. They moved camp further uphill, away from the kill site. The mule was unsettled but alive. The next day, they walked slower, quieter, smarter. Tomasz carried a sharpened spear now, wood reinforced with metal. Maja fashioned makeshift noisemakers from bottle caps and string. Anya began marking trees as they passed with a system of silent symbols. The pack had forced them to evolve. And in the heart of a reclaimed wilderness, they were learning that the old rules no longer applied. Nature had moved on. They would have to do the same. Chapter 3, Part 4, The Tracks. The wind changed on the third morning. It carried something strange, not the wild sense of moss and rot and wet wood they'd grown used to, but the sharp, unnatural sting of oil and ozone. Something alive in the infrastructure. Not old death, new movement. They'd seen tracks before, half-eaten by soil and vine, buried under the weight of years. That old rail in Poland, before they crossed the border, had been a ghost, forgotten and silent, overgrown and sinking. Tomasz had even said then, "Nothing's run on this line since the old world died." But this line was different. These rails gleamed faintly in the haze. No moss clung to them. No cracks split the gravel bed. The trees nearby had been deliberately trimmed back in a clean, even line. There were tire ruts in the gravel, clean cuts in the brush. Something used this line, recently and regularly. Maja was the first to speak. "Looks like someone still cares for it." Tomasz nodded slowly. eyes scanning the edge of the trees. No, not just cares. Maintains. This isn't scavenger work, this is system work. The others exchanged uneasy glances. They followed the tracks until they came upon a low-rise structure half-eaten by fog and ivy. A depot or substation, at least that's what it once was. As they stepped closer, the sensors hummed faintly. A still functional door groaned open with hydraulic hiss. Inside, it was cold, dim, and clean. There were solar panels strung in rows behind the building, feeding a working terminal. A regional map glowed on the screen, faint and flickering. Lines blinked with active data. Trains were running. Tomasz stared at the display, the weight of it settling like a stone in his gut. Whoever's using this has power, organization, supply lines. Grandfather Victor muttered something under his breath, an old word Tomasz hadn't heard since childhood, a word that meant empire. They stayed only long enough to study the map. One train was due in this sector in less than 3 hours. With silent agreement, they backed away, turned, and disappeared into the forest. They didn't speak until they were 2 kilometers away. "We don't mention this to anyone we meet," Tomasz said finally. "We don't know what it is yet, but it's big. And dangerous." Chapter 3, Part 5, Blood and Silence. The wind changed. Tomasz felt it before he saw anything. Just a subtle shift in the air, the kind that stirred primal warning bells deep in the spine. The rustling leaves no longer whispered. They chattered like teeth. The birds were silent. No insects hummed. Only the low thud of boots on soil and the quiet creak of the gear-laden cart broke the uneasy stillness. Then came the growl. Low, guttural, not far. The woods breathed out predators. "Stop," Tomasz said, barely above a whisper. His arm reached instinctively across Maja's path. She froze. The others followed his eyes, scanning the underbrush. The wolves came out slowly, gray ghosts against the green. 5 at first, then more, emerging in a broken half-circle. Not rabid, not desperate, coordinated. One barked, a signal. The group raised weapons. Tomasz stepped in front of Maja, shotgun ready. "Back up slowly. Don't run." Maja moved with shaking steps. One of the wolves darted forward, snapping close enough to taste cloth, then leapt back, testing. "Shit," whispered Yannick. "They're hurting us." "Not today," Tomasz growled. He fired once, loud, cracking, deafening in the trees. A wolf yelped and fell. The others scattered, but not far. A second charge. This time they were faster. Maja screamed, a sudden sharp cry, and Tomasz saw her stumble. Blood. Her leg, bitten. A wolf clamped onto her thigh just below the hip, dragging her down. He didn't think. He slammed the butt of the shotgun into the wolf's head with all his strength. The beast yelped, released, and Tomasz fired point blank into its skull. Blood sprayed his coat. The others were holding the line, shouting, firing, making themselves big. The wolves, startled by the noise and losses, finally retreated, vanishing into the woods as quickly as they'd appeared. Silence again. Maja was on the ground, teeth gritted, clutching her bleeding leg. Tomasz dropped beside her, already tearing open his medical kit. "I'm fine," she hissed, pale. "You're not. Don't move. You're shaking." He ignored that. "You're not dying today, understand?" He worked quickly, cleansing, disinfecting, dressing the wound with care and a touch that belied the rage in his eyes. His hands, though calloused and scarred, moved gently. "I told you I could walk," she muttered, trying to grin. "Yeah, well," Tomasz said, securing the bandage, "next time a wolf latches onto your leg, tell it you've got it under control." She laughed despite the pain, a raw, broken sound that turned into a sob. He squeezed her shoulder. "You did good, but I'm not losing you." Yannick approached, scanning the tree line. "They're still out there, but they're waiting. We hurt them. Might not come back today." "Then we move," Tomasz said, standing. "Now." They made it another kilometer before dusk. Then they found it, a squat concrete structure, mostly hidden by creeping vines and moss. A rail service station. Doors sealed. Solar panels, intact. One wall-mounted console still blinked softly, its lights almost alien in the natural decay. They cracked it open with old engineer codes from Yannick's memory. Inside, cool air, filtered, clean benches, equipment. In the back, a drone the size of a large dog, its body sleek and dust-free. And crates, medical packs, power cells, compact rations, even a functioning digital map system. It was gold. And a risk. "They'll track this," Tomasz said. "If they're using the trains, they'll have records. They'll know it's opened." "They'll be here," Yannick agreed. "If they're watching the lines, this place lights up like a flare." Maja sat on a bench, leg elevated, bandage spotted red. She looked at the drone longingly. That thing could scout for us, fight for us, or lead them straight to us, Tomasz replied. We take rations, first aid, some batteries, leave the rest. It was a hard call, but they all knew he was right. Before they left, Tomasz lingered, staring at the drone. Tools, power, safety. Left behind, because survival wasn't always about what you could carry, but what you could leave. Chapter 3, Part 6, Cold Signal. The storm began just after midnight. Not a gentle spring rain, but a hammering, sideways downpour that turned soil to sludge and wind to knives. The trees groaned and bent, as if bowing under the weight of the sky's fury. They had camped in a hollow beneath an overpass, the steel frame of an old railway bridge above them. The only blessing, it held. The concrete remained intact, a stubborn relic refusing to fall like so much else. Tomasz couldn't sleep. He watched the rain from under the tarp they had stretched between support columns. Maja shifted beside him, her breathing shallow, either from pain or dreams. Yannick snored. He always snored when things were worst. It was his version of not caring. A faint sound pricked Tomasz's ear, mechanical, distant. Not thunder, not wolves. He got up. Up the embankment, careful in the rain. He reached the tracks. Something blinked again, just like before. Small, red, low to the rail, and gone in a second. Then, there it was again, maybe a kilometer off. A drone, rail-mounted, moving. It slid silently along the line, sleek and insectal, barely the size of a suitcase, scanning, mapping, watching. Tomasz dropped flat, heart thudding, not because he feared the machine, but because of what it meant. The infrastructure wasn't just used. It was watched, maintained, controlled. Someone was out there, organized, and close enough to send a drone through a storm in the middle of the night. He waited until it was gone, then slid back down to camp. Maja was awake, watching him. Her eyes were wide and quiet. You saw something. He nodded. We're not alone out here. Something's riding the tracks. Machines. Maybe scouts. Friendly? No. He didn't explain why he was so sure. Get some sleep. We moved before dawn. They left in silence. Cold, soaked, miserable. But they moved. Mud slowed the cart. Yannick cursed and cracked his back every few steps. Maja winced with every limp, but refused to ride. They reached a clearing by noon, a spot once used for camping. Rusted signs still stood. Welcome walkers, safe camp zone. A joke now. But it gave them a view. To the north, the landscape flattened. And in the distance, on the horizon, tall towers cut through the mist like jagged teeth. Not new, not old, industrial and gray, flanked by rails and faded solar panels. Border towers. Left behind 18 years ago when the Danish outer defenses were decommissioned. Now, they stood reactivated, or worse, repurposed. Between them and the towers, fields, open land. No cover, no shadows. God, Maja whispered. Tomasz stood still. We're getting close. To what? Answers. She nodded, slowly, her face pale but set. Then let's walk. Chapter 3, Part 7, Shadows over the Old Border. The sky remained a bruised gray as the group approached the ancient border towers. The rain had slowed to a persistent drizzle, but the air was thick with the scent of wet earth and rust. The towers loomed large, cold, unyielding sentinels standing guard over a land long forgotten by most but not by all. Tomasz led the way, the cart's wheels slipping in the mud, leaving a trail behind them like scars in the earth. Each step forward was heavier than the last, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on them all. Maja walked beside him, her limp barely noticeable now, but her gaze was sharp, scanning every shadow and rusted fence. She had grown quieter these past days, her usual spark dimmed but never extinguished. Yannick brought up the rear, his usual gruffness tempered by exhaustion. The boy, Jakub, sat silently on the cart, his wide eyes reflecting both fear and a hardened resolve beyond his years. They stopped at the base of the first tower. It was massive, an iron skeleton wrapped in wires and faded warning signs. The rusted gates hung open, creaking softly in the wind. Tomasz wiped the mud from his hands on his trousers and stepped inside the tower's hollow base. Inside, machinery lay dormant, broken screens, corroded control panels, and thick cables snaking across the floor like the veins of a sleeping giant. Used to be a checkpoint, Tomasz said quietly, back when the border meant something. Maja crouched down, her fingers tracing the cracked floor tiles. Seems like no one's been here in years. Or no one wants to be seen here. Tomasz's voice was low, wary. Suddenly, a faint hum vibrated through the air. Tomasz stiffened and motioned for everyone to freeze. The hum grew louder, a mechanical were blending with the soft patter of rain. From the shadows, a panel slid open, revealing a dim blue light. A small drone emerged, buzzing softly, scanning the faces before retreating into the tower's depths. Yannick cursed under his breath. Damn things never sleep. Maja's eyes narrowed. Who's controlling this? And why? Tomasz didn't answer. Instead, he stared out from the tower's window at the field stretching beyond, the wide-open land between them and the next tower. No cover, no sanctuary. We have to cross it, Tomasz said. No other way. The group prepared to move again. Tomasz handed Maja a small metal object he had found earlier, a compact flare gun, old but functional. If things go south, this will buy us time. She nodded, gripping it tightly. As they stepped outside, the wind picked up, carrying distant howls that set nerves on edge. The wolves had returned, their numbers swelled by the pandemic years, and they were hungry. The crossing was brutal. The mud sucked at their boots, the cold seeped through their clothes, and every rustle in the brush made hearts race. Halfway across, Jakub stumbled, and a sharp cry pierced the air. A wolf, sleek and hungry, appeared at the edge of the tree line, eyes glowing with a feral intelligence. Tomasz acted fast. He raised the flare gun and fired a brilliant streak of red light into the sky. The wolf yelped and retreated, but the warning was clear. They were being watched by nature as much as by machines. When they reached the next tower, exhaustion clawed at their bones. The rain was relentless, and Tomasz felt the old ache in his knees settle in. Maja suddenly stopped, her gaze fixed on a small garden of wildflowers blooming stubbornly between the cracked concrete slabs. "Life finds a way," she whispered, reaching down to touch a fragile purple petal. Tomasz smiled faintly. "Even here." They rested briefly, and Tomasz shared a quiet moment with Maja, words unspoken but understood. The bond between them was more than survival, it was hope, a fragile ember burning against the dark. As night fell, the group made camp beneath the shadow of the last tower. The storm had passed, leaving a cold, clear sky dotted with stars. But Tomasz's thoughts were elsewhere. He thought about the drones, the towers, the strange signals pulsing through the abandoned infrastructure. Someone was running this, controlling this old border, whether as a relic or as a weapon. And if that was true, then their journey was no longer just about survival or finding a home. It was a fight against a hidden force watching from the shadows, waiting to decide who would live and who would fall. The night was long and restless, but in the morning, Tomasz looked at his small, battered group and made a silent promise. They would face whatever came next. Because the rough road back was far from over.